Right, now that we've talked about fractions and adding negative fractions, let's talk about what we need to do when we have decimals. Decimals follow the same exact rules that fractions do and that integers do, so we really just need to remember how do we actually add and subtract decimals. So let's look at an example. Let's say I have negative 6.2 plus 5.8. Okay? First thing I'm going to see, different signs means I actually need to solve a subtraction problem here. Now, the most important thing to remember when we work with decimals is that the larger decimal needs to go on top, and we need to line up the decimal places. So in this case, I'm going to line up the decimal places. So I have 6.2 over 5.8. I said since they're different signs, I need to subtract, so we're going to subtract these. And now remember, we're going to subtract this just like we normally would, just pretending that there's not a decimal point there. We're just going to bring it into our answer. So I can't do 2 minus 8, so I'm going to borrow from the 5 and make this a 12. 12 minus 8 is 4, and 5 minus 5 is 0. So my answer here is, or the numerical part of my answer is going to be 0.4. The last thing we need to do, as with any time we have negatives or positives, is we need to determine whether the answer is going to be positive or negative. So I'm going to look at the numbers as if the decimals weren't there. I have 6.2 and I have 5.8. I know that 6.2 is bigger. Since that's a negative in the problem, the answer is going to be negative 0.4. Let's try another problem. Let's try this time 12.67 plus negative 5.2. Again, different signs, so I need to actually solve a subtraction problem. So I have 12.67. I'm going to subtract from that 5.2. Remember, I need to line up my decimal points. Notice how the decimal points are lined up. It's okay that there's nothing under the 1 and nothing under the 7. I can put zeros there if I need to. Now I'm going to subtract. 7 minus 0 is 7. 6 minus 2 is 4. Bring down the decimal point. 2 minus 5 I can't do, so I'm going to borrow from the 1, make it a 0. The 2 becomes a 12. 12 minus 5 is 7. So my answer here is 7.47. And now we need to decide whether it should be positive or negative. So I'm going to look in the problem. I have a 12.67 and I have a 5.2. Well, I know 12.67 is bigger. That's positive in the problem, so my answer is going to be positive. So my final answer is just 7.47. Okay, let's try another one. Let's this time say I'm going to have negative 26.8 plus negative 5.75. Move this to the top of the screen. I'm going to go through the same steps that I always talk about. These are the same signs. So this time I need to solve an addition problem. Adding decimals is just like subtracting them. Line up the decimal points, 26.8, and line up the second one, obviously, 5.75. This time I'm going to add. Again, it's okay if I don't have everything lined up. I can put zeros as placeholders. 0 plus 5 is 5. 8 plus 7 I know is 15. I'm going to carry my 1. Now I have 1 plus 6 is 7, and 7 plus 5 is 12. I'm going to carry my 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. So this time I have 32.55. But since both of the numbers in the problem are negative, my answer needs to be negative. So the answer is negative 32.55. Let's do one more here for good luck. Let's say negative 10.24 plus positive 2.48. Different signs means I should subtract. So I have 10.24 minus 2.48. To do my subtraction here, 4 minus 8 I can't do. I'm going to borrow. 14 minus 8 is 6. Can't do 1 minus 4, so I'm going to have to come over here. I'm going to look at this as a 10, and I'm going to change the whole thing to a 9. And I'm going to give another 1 over here. So now I have 11 minus 4 is 7. And this 10 became a 9. 9 minus 2 is 7. So I have 7.76. And I just need to decide positive or negative. Well, I look at the problem. The bigger number is the 10.24. That's bigger than 2.28. The part of that is negative, so my answer is negative 7. Okay, we're going to talk about adding fractions today that may be positive and negative. So let's start first with just a simple example. We're going to strictly right now work with fractions that have common denominators. So for example, let's say I wanted to add the fraction 5/8 with the fraction 1/8. We should remember that when we add fractions, as long as we have a common denominator, it does not change. Since I'm adding two fractions that are over 8, my answer is going to be over 8. And in this case, all I need to do is add the numerators. 5 plus 1 is 6, so I have 6 over 8. Now, we always want to express our answers in simplest form. So remember, when we try to simplify a fraction, we're looking for what can we divide the numerator and the denominator by. In this case, I see that they are both positive numbers and even. So I can know, since they're even, I can divide them by 2 right away. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So in this case, my answer would be 3 over 4. Let's take a look at another example. Let's throw in some negatives now. When we add fractions with negatives, we're going to follow the same rules that we would with integers. So let's say I wanted to add, 4/11 plus negative 2/11. The first thing I'm going to see is that I have one positive and one negative. These are different signs. So when I have a problem with different signs, I know that I should actually subtract. So in this case, the problem I need to solve is 4/11 minus 2/11. Subtracting fractions is just like adding them. My denominator, as long as it is common, stays the same. And all I need to do is subtract the numerators. 4 minus 2 is 2. So I get 2/11. Now, what I need to check is to see if my answer will be positive or negative. So I'm going to look for the bigger number without the negative. So I'm going to compare 4/11 and 2/11. I know that 4/11 is bigger than 2/11, so my answer is going to be positive 2/11. We followed the same steps that we did when we used integers, except now we're using fractions. Let's take a look at another example. Let's try this time 12/17 plus negative 15/17. Again, I have a problem with different signs, and when I have different signs, I know that I should subtract. So I know that I need to take 15/17 minus 12/17. 15 minus 12 is 3, so this gives me 3/17. So right away, I know that the numerical part of my answer is 3 over 17. And now I need to decide whether it's positive or negative. So I'm going to look at my original problem. I have 12/17 and 15/17. I know that 15 is bigger than 12, so I'm going to keep the sign of the 15/17, which is negative. So my answer here is negative 3 over 17. One or two more examples here. Let's take a look at this one. Let's say I wanted to add, negative 2/5 plus negative 1/5. Now, same steps. I'm going to ask myself, same signs or different signs? In this case, I have the same signs. And when I have the same signs, I know that I add. So I have 2/5 plus 1/5, which I know the 5 stays the same, and 2 plus 1 is 3. So I know the numerical part of my answer here is 3/5. But since both the numbers I were adding are negative, I know my answer needs to be negative. So my answer here is 3/5. So adding fractions with negative signs is the same as adding integers with negative signs. We follow the same rules. And if we have like denominators, all we need to do is really add the numerators together following our rules. Now that you've got a couple examples, go ahead and complete the practice problems in the PlayPosit.